What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today we're talking about the Ultra Prism Through Darkness Ablaze metagame, which is the standard format prior to rotation, which the Atlas POG 2020 tournament will be held in. That's what we'll be playing that tournament in, so we are doing this meta discussion for it. It's going to be a fairly unique and underdeveloped metagame since we have had 0 major events in this format, and we will have 0 major events in this format after the tournament. So it's kind of a one and done, but there are a lot of people playing in it from all around the world, so should be really interesting to see how many people put in the time to try to do really well in this format. And I have 3 guests with me today who are trying to do really well in this format. We're going to try to break down this meta for everybody. So we'll go in the order of Kevin, Danny, and Mike. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell me your name, how long you've been playing the game, an accomplishment or 2 that you've had in the Pokemon TCG, and kind of where you lie in the community of the Pokemon trading card game. We'll go Kevin, Danny, then Mike. Go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I just heard Danny, and I was like, okay, where is he? Okay, yeah. So I'm Kevin Clementi. I'm a second-year player out of Washington State. Some of the accomplishments, I guess this year has been my bigger year. I got top 16 in Portland, top 32 in San Diego. I just missed making the Limitless Invitational for this online stuff, and I'm a content creator. So you may also know me as Mellow_Magikarp on Twitch, Twitter, etc.
Hey, Mellow Madge.
And Danny?
My name is Daniel Altavilla. I've been playing for 16 years now, a little too long, I guess. It's a healthy addiction, though. I am not really creating content anymore. I'm just focusing on kind of advancing in my personal life. But I am recently I've put up a Patreon with a Discord. We can get all my lists and stuff, so I'm pretty much focusing on that, and then I write articles here and there for TRX Gaming, and if any other article sites want to pick me up, I'm totally down to write more. I love talking about the game, analyzing the game, and now I pretty much just watch streams and say Keck W a lot.
And you've had some pretty good accomplishments recently, right, in the game?
Yeah, actually, within the last couple of years, I've really hit a couple home runs here and there. So definitely stoked about that. Ready for tournaments to come back. My competitive drive is still strong. Might not aim for top 16, but definitely want to do my best at a couple real events. So
cool. And last but not least, Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike. I've been playing Pokemon. This is my 4th year, I think. 4th year in the game. And I guess I'm somewhere between an amalgamation of content creator, Cutter Tap member, and artist in the game, I guess. I touch a lot of bags. Pause.
Cool. Cool. And you've done pretty well for yourself in the game, correct?
I mean, yeah, I guess for somebody who's been in the game for so little time.
Some top 8, some top 32s.
Yeah, a few of those.
Yeah. I just don't want you guys to be too humble. You're all good at the game, so people come on sometimes and be kind of remiss to say that they've done well, but y'all know what you're talking about. Okay, so yeah, POG 2020 format, Ultra Prism Through Darkness Ablaze. If you're watching this, there's a ton of content on this channel and on other channels about deck lists, decks, gameplay, the format, if you need any information. And I also have a link for Atlas POG information if you need it. I actually have some information real quick before we get into talking about the meta game that, if my Facebook Messenger will open up for me, that registration will be opening on Wednesday, I believe, and deck lists will be due by 12 a.m. Eastern on Saturday, which is 6 hours before day 1 starts, I think. So Of course, check all that information on Atlas POG, but just a reminder, make sure you turn in your deck list on time and make sure you register before it's too late to register. So yeah, we're going to be talking about what we think the metagame will look like for this tournament, and to kind of get a grasp on how this meta will form. Danny, I wanted to start with you. Do you think this metagame is forming differently than any other metagame, and would you consider it similar to how the World's metagame usually forms?
So with the World's metagame, what we normally have is a pretty strong idea of what the actual meta decks are. People normally agree on tier lists, but the one thing that we disagree on, obviously, is the actual inner workings of our lists. So you're probably going to see Eternatus lists with Turbo Patch, Vikavolt lists with Turbo Patch, both of these decks without. You're going to see ADP with Crushing, ADP without Crushing, etc. The one thing, though, that seems to kind of stray away from what we normally see is it doesn't feel like a triangle meta this time around. I think most decks have a good shot at beating most decks if their game plan works out. I think every deck has a solid line of play against each other, and it's been very, back and forth with a lot of different decks. On top of that, I think that the way the metagame is changing is that ADPZ is the breakout deck, and people seem to be trying to aim for the bench support Pokemon over aiming for the heavy VMAXs, because what other option do we have? So it's starting to feel like people are going to try and immediately stray away from putting these big bench Pokemon down, maybe trying to play cards like Super Scoop Up just to have an option against ADP to leave alone VMAX or something like that. So I can totally see lists all being completely different, with ADPZ being the one deck that is kind of a constant for the format, and it feels not like a triangle but like the World versus ADP right now, where once we find an answer to that deck, it'll get shot down to tier 2, and then we're going to have to start dealing with whatever the next best deck is, and so on and so forth. But it does not feel like one deck beats another deck that loses to this deck that loses to X, Y, and Z. So that is something very strange and different for this meta that I honestly really appreciate.
Cool. Yeah, I was getting a little worried almost that I was overhyping some decks, because it really felt like there were more decks than usual that are fairly viable. So it's reassuring to hear somebody else think that as well. Mike or Kevin, do you have any differing thoughts or anything that you'd like to back up that Danny said?
I think that Danny is definitely correct. A lot of this game has been revolving around ADP and the deck that's usually the keystone deck. And when you walk into Worlds, there is like one clear best deck. And this time around, we haven't gotten the adequate time to like test and feel it out. Like you were saying before the stream started, we've only seen one tournament. But with metas like this, it's a good time for Rogue. So, the team is working on something spicy.
How about you, Kevin?
Agree 100%. There's nothing else to really say that hasn't been said. It's been on PTCGO for a week. Some stuff's already established, so I'm expecting a lot of that.
Cool. Yeah, one of the questions I got when I posted on Facebook and Twitter for questions for this was actually if the majority of the decks cut the Dene or Crobat to save themselves from ADP forcing you have to go through the VMAX, and does ADP have to actually think about this for POG? And Danny already touched on that in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the video. So I guess we can start there. Kevin, do you think decks will cut these GX and V Pokemon, or even go as far as to build Green's versions of decks to have no targets for ADP to hit?
I mean, I could see people doing it, but I don't think that's a great idea. Like, the way to play around ADP was always you try to set up without ever benching a Dedenne, without ever benching Eldegoss, anything that they could ultimate ray for a knockout. Assuming, your baby Blounds, you do whatever. Like, that's a different story. But I don't think cutting them is a good idea, because then you're going to lose to everything else. Like, you do need to have those options. So I don't think it's a good idea to just straight cut them. Take the chance that you're going to start your one of Dedenne, but definitely keep it and just be smart and play around it.
Definitely.
Mike, same thoughts, kind of?
Absolutely. And I mean, some people are kind of, what? Can we curse here? Oh, or do you prefer? I just
Try
want
to
to
keep
make
it clean.
like some people are like downing on like Piers, but I think Piers is really good for rogue decks, like especially like Spiritomb. I'm gonna be on that soapbox, so because like you can Spiritomb attach a dark to a, I mean you can attach a dark to a Spiritomb and get a Crobat for the turn. So that's kind of crazy. Spiritomb, I never really had problems with ADP, but like looking toward the meta and what the assumed decks are, I think that playing these setup Pokemon are gonna be okay. Because I mean, it depends on the goal of your deck. Like like uh, like Spiritomb, they always wanted to hit into ADP before ADP got off the Alter Creation, which was something that was easy to do. Your one energy attacker, and then the next turn you just pop off and kill ADP. So it really just depends on how your deck deals with big basics.
Yeah, so I do think ADPZ is going to be a very good deck. It'll be successful. It'll be relatively popular, but that's actually what I want to get into to set the tone for the next 25 or so minutes of discussion we'll have here. Do you think there will be a deck or decks that take up large chunks of the meta, or do you think it'll be fairly spread out? Because this is something important to know when you're building your deck and when you're selecting your deck, and even when you're picking which decks to test, because realistically we can't all test every matchup for every deck. We'd like to, but you do have to theory a bunch as well. So let's start with Mike. Mike, do you think there will be a deck or even two decks that take up like 15+% of the meta, kind of like in the Rebel Clash format? We had Dragapol, Baby Blounds, Picoram. They would take up like half of the day one meta, just the three of those combined. Are we going to see that here for the POG 2020?
I don't know about a number that's that high, but you can always guarantee that one of those three decks will pop up into the meta and take a large portion. Like the decks that really kind of sit in that spot for me are Pika, Eternatus, and ADPZ, obviously. I think that ADPZ being the front runner can still pick off a few things and make Pika still uncomfortable. Eternatus obviously needs that big board, and they play 4 Crobat V, so they're still a little bit uncomfortable. But Eternatus can one-shot an ADP, so I think they have a good shot. So whoever is making up that 10-15% air right there, they got a nice little smorgasbord to pick from.
What do you think about that, Danny? Kind of same question. What do you think the meta will be like largely spread out, or do you think it will centralize around like 3 decks and then everybody else fills in the pie?
So, like I said before, I feel like most decks have a shot against most decks right now. The general theme that seems to be kind of like all encompassing right now is the fact that ADP eats up these bench sitters, and that bench sitters, especially with Crobat just being released, are extremely popular right now. The immediate thing that I noticed about this format after testing it day one was that it seemed very obvious, especially with playing on ladder and whatnot, that ADP was going to be, the biggest option immediately, and that's simply because the deck mostly resides in older sets, so you don't have to go crazy, buying a million cards to build it. So that is the, first and foremost thing that seems to make the most sense in my opinion. Now, with that being said, I think that a good option to deal with ADP is for older concepts to come back into play. My most immediate answer to ADP that I've been kind of trying to talk to my testing group about and stuff like that is obviously going to be Burst GX. So I think that the best way to one-shot a VMAX and to beat ADP, the best way to beat ADP is to take a prize card turn 1 before they can GX. The best way to one-shot a VMAX is a guy with a no damage cap. So how do you get that? Blacephalon Naganadel. And that seems, very poised right now in a way that it wasn't before due to, maybe things like Picoram being a bit more consistent and whatnot. I think it can handle Vikavolt as a welder deck. I think it can handle ADP, and I think it can handle VMAXs. So I think that people need to get a little creative for the format to not turn into an ADP centralized format. But right now, in the early stages of the format, that's exactly what it has become.
So we're hearing Blacephalon GX. You're here to hear, folks. That's a really I like that idea.
That's a
It
hot
makes sense. That is a hot take. But go trade for your Blacephalon GXs now, everyone. They're gonna be 20 Darkness Ablaze packs on public trades. Kevin, how about you? What do you think about the meta? And if you think the same things, then you can kind of start us off with which of those decks do you think will be at the popular? Because we kind of threw around some names. Obviously, ADPZ, I think we can just count on that being one of, like, in the top 3 most played. Just to generalize it a bit, but you can start throwing around some other decks and why you think.
I mean, I hate to give the boring answer, but the meta is going to be kind of what we expect, I'd assume. Like, the ladders dictates pretty effectively, and you look at the tournaments that we've been getting for the Sunday Open, PokeX, etc. EDP's huge, as everyone else has said. You said Scorch feels like it's going to take up a pretty decent chunk. I don't know if it's going to be enough. Baby Blound's probably going to take up a pretty big chunk. I don't know if it's going to be like enough to be like that gigantic slice of the pie, but these decks feel like they're 100% going to be there in large numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, just because a deck is popular doesn't mean it's going to be very successful, and just because a deck is thought to be popular, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to beat it. Like, you can completely dodge some decks and hit 5 of another. So Picoram, I think, is an interesting one, because it's just like ADP with, I think you might have all touched on it by now, but it gains like 1 new card, so you have to trade for like a Vikavolt, and that, excuse me, and that might be it. Just like ADPZ, like, trades for a Crobat, and then you have your whole deck, from regarding adding new set cards to it. But Picoram struggles, or at least seems to struggle, with the new VMAX meta a bit more than ADPZ does. ADPZ players almost are saying it thrives on it because you can gust around these big Pokemon. But Picoram might struggle a little bit more with Eternatus and Scorch and others. Danny, what do you think about Pika? Will it be popular and successful, or just one or the other?
Well, my immediate opinion about Picoram after playing it on ladder with the Vikavolt deck is that it struggles heavily against Vikavolt because they have the perfect match setup. 50 into 190 is a KO. You cannot put down your big charm or whatever. Even if you do, Electro Power negates it. And the item lock definitely hurts you a bit, especially if they choose to go second and then immediately get into the item lock. Now, the best way around that is to, I suppose, have your own Vikavolt and then charge up a Pika on the bench. But while you're doing that, they're charging up more attackers and can potentially win the prize trade. And that's just one matchup. So ADPZ versus Pika has always been kind of like, I don't know, like ancient Greece. You know, you have two big guys just duking it out constantly, and it's always been back and forth, mostly favored towards ADP because of the damage output and the extra prize card. And once Picoram starts picking up traction, assuming it does, then people throw in a Mew, and now their deck has maybe 5 to 10% better matchup against it because the Tag Bolt is now out of there. There's still decks like Mad Party that is actually doing extremely well, decks like Baby Blacephalon that you have to worry about, Eternatus. I think you'll never be able to deal with that deck as a Picoram player, rather. And on top of that, people are even, potentially going to mess around with something ridiculous like Phalanx or something. So, who knows what kind of obstacles Pika has to deal with it. It did just win an event yesterday. I believe the Sunday Open played Darkness Ablaze. I'm not sure. And
yeah.
So the Sunday Open played Darkness Ablaze and Picoram still won. And like you said, in any tournament where you get lucky enough to dodge certain matchups or things just happen to go your way, any deck can win. If we have infinite events, every deck's going to win at some point. That's how it goes. So I don't have high hopes for Picoram. I don't think it'll ever centralize the meta or anything, but due to its inherent consistency, especially more so than other decks, I can see it doing well, but not well enough to consistently top, and not most likely not represented well enough to have the opportunity to top that often.
Yeah, so just to touch on the Sunday Open, there were about 130 players, I think, this week, and it is a bit of a casual competitive tournament. Picoram actually went 12-0, winning the event, and it beat 7 ADPZs on the way there. So I believe it hit 2 Scorch, one Vikavolt, like 7 ADPZs, and then a handful of other things. So it was one of those situations where it kind of hit a chunk of one deck, and I also think there was a super lack of Eternatus because people have not traded for it yet. They're waiting for the prices to go down, which happens the first week the set is out. And also Picoram has the battle deck that came out. You could pick it up at Walmart for $25, and you have like most of your Picoram deck. So that's also something to keep in mind, I think. Mike, let's go over to you, and I wanted to ask you about Baby Blacephalon, because that's kind of one of the decks that were really popular and really strong last format, and I think it has a very impressive matchup spread. It looks very good on paper, at least. I'm not one to actually test Baby Blacephalon, but because I know I'm not going to end up playing it, but I'll definitely look at its matchup spread and give it credit where it's due. Do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, on paper, it looks like a great deck. The meta looks like it's like served on a platter for it. But I mean, you also have to consider when you play that deck that it's no matter how consistent you try to make the deck, you're always gonna run into that imperfect 7 cards, and you're gonna have that opening hand. It's gonna be like fire, card that doesn't matter, card that might help you, and then card that doesn't do anything. And you're just like, okay, I mean, what do you do at that point? Wait for something to die? And then you're going from there, and you, like a lot of these other big decks, they had time to, or they created the consistency for themselves to withstand that kind of pressure. But you're still too fragile.
So do you think Baby Blounds will be popular?
No, not at all.
Kevin.
Not at all.
Kevin, what do you think?
For Baby Blounds?
Yeah.
I personally hate the deck. It doesn't work with me. I get donked too often. But I think it's going to be popular. It's just good. Like, the matchup spread is amazing. You lose to Vikavolt, and you kind of beat everything else. And you just have the power. Like, yes, you can dead draw. Yes, it's not necessarily the consistent pick. All that kind of stuff of Baby Blounds can be Baby Blounds. Top tier player can go 0-3 drop with nothing in their hand. But it's just good. So I 100% expect it to be a large amount of the meta.
The way I think about a deck like Baby Blounds is it's like 100 soldiers like running in with a sword, and like 5 of them are going to pop out the other end, and those 5 are like, so and like you said, a super good player like could go in with Baby Blounds, do everything they can correctly, and maybe the cards just won't just fall their way. But yeah, you can't really deny it's on paper numbers.
Exactly.
Danny, do you have anything different to say about Baby Blounds?
So my issue with Baby Blounds is that I think it gains a very hard matchup in the form of Vikavolt. I think even a Vikavolt tech and Picoram, while they're slow, while you can't knock it out, you can't pressure it very hard, and you are setting up a tag bolt on the bench, can slowly just whittle away at them until you get in there. I think that's going to be very difficult for them to deal with. I do think people are going to respect Baby Blounds less, and obviously every time you don't respect a deck, that's usually when it does its best, right? So that's pretty much how I see it. I think Kevin pretty much hit it on the money that it's a good deck. People have the cards for it. I could totally see people using that as the primary single prize attacking deck. And on top of that, I feel like it could have, a potential card pool to deal with the Vikavolt. So, for example, you have Bursting Burn on my favorite guy, Blacephalon GX, of course. You have maybe the potential to put in a Reshizard to try and pressure them with a 200 damage attack into a 230 damage attack into Outrage if you get that far. So there are definitely options. You play a Cobalion GX to Iron Rule, get a guaranteed turn of items. So there's plenty of things you can do. I'm not sure if they'll work, though. Haven't tested that matchup very extensively yet. And I think the deck does have inherent consistency issues as well. So while I do see it doing well in the right field, especially day one of POG with the incessant amount of ADP that I expect, I don't see it being particularly incredible in a more diverse field with newer decks, because I think that there are a couple things that it just cannot deal with, especially now that there's another big single prize attacker deck coming out in the meta, in that and that it has to put down so many two prizers, to even keep the Blounce coming. So that inherently makes it worse against other single prize attacker decks. So Blacephalon does have some obstacles. Baby Blounce specifically does have some obstacles, but it is a deck that can do well with the right conditions.
Awesome.
So are you confirming that Mad Party is a good one prizer deck?
I will not confirm or deny this.
But yeah, Danny was referencing Mad Party there, I believe. He was either referencing Mad Party or Cartana Glimwood Tangle. So we'll leave that to the viewers to decide. So I want to talk about another one of the decks that were very good for the RCL format, which is Dragapol. I will go out here and say I don't think Dragapol is dead. I think it has plenty of good matchups. I have it sitting like solidly at the top of tier 2 because I just kind of have this rule where I really struggle to drop a deck from being one of the 3 best decks all the way down to tier 3 with just one set release. I understand it gains this new powerhouse of a bad matchup in Eternatus, but I don't expect a quarter of the meta to be Eternatus. And it still has its 50-50s and its good matchups that are all still being played. So, Mike, what do you think about Draga?
I mean, I like Dragapol a lot, but Eternatus is creeping through the back of my skull. So, if Eternatus turns out to not be as good as it looks, then Dragapol really will have a great time in the meta. It's not really afraid of Pika. You're not really afraid of ADP at all. And everything else is just not good enough to keep up with you. So, I mean, if you find a way to beat Eternatus and you can tech for it, then you'll have a great day at the POG tournament.
Danny, how about Draga for you?
So, what was it? The POG official meta forecast. Robin Schulz brought up Draga. Robin has won Worlds. I haven't, so I would like to assume that what he says is the law. So if he says Drag is good, I'm all for it. Personally, I don't like decks that take a straight up hard auto loss to anything in the immediate tier 1, especially to the poster boy of the new set. So if the card's on the pack art, you most likely don't want to end up losing to it that hard. But I'm sure people can find a way to deal with it. Maybe a more teched out Dragapult list, but then that begs the question: how inconsistent are you to deal with other decks? So it definitely has a lot of immediate issues, and I'm not sure if it'll be that great for POG, assuming people are playing Eternatus as much as it's being hyped up. But like you said, it's not going to get knocked down to the tier 3 assuredly. It's definitely probably still somewhere around the tier 1, tier 1.5 area. And it's something that maybe in post rotation will shine a little bit more, where Eternatus gets a bit more inconsistent and playing Crushing Hammers can buy you enough time to get that dub. But as of right now, I don't see it being incredible. And it'll take, like I said with Baby Blounce, it'll take having to get around that huge new obstacle to do well, but by no means is it not poised to do so in that case.
Cool. Kevin, unless you had anything different to say about Draga, do you?
I'll add a quick thing, and I'll probably end up touching on it later for other decks, but a lot of people are putting Zamazenta into extra decks or putting multiple Zamazentas. And so that could potentially hurt Dragapult just as a byproduct of people trying to tech for Eternatus or Centiskorch.
Cool. So I was going to ask you, how do you feel about Vikavolt? It got first and second place in the Pokemon Japan Nationals Online, which was a 220 plus person event in this exact format. How do you feel about Vika, Sleepy Vika, Straight Vika, Giant Bombs, Hammers, whatever it is? Do you think it's tier 1? Do you think it's overhyped?
I love Vika. It's such a fun deck. I've tried all the major variants, the sleep, the tag call, and then just like the straight with like researches and whatnot. And they're all good. Like they all just keep winning. But I'm a fan of the regular research, Marnies. I've added bird keepers in there, just like straightforward, aggressive draw. I hate the tag call engine. it feels like, okay, cool, I can discard my entire hand to get a speed energy. I hate the sleep version because the Mareep's just kind of like chilling on the bench. They're good because Vika's good. I think it's a super, super strong deck. If you're going to play Vika, though, I've just noticed this on the ladder or like creeping into other people's streams. It's not just hit Paralyzing Bolt over and over again. The deck is nowhere near that linear. It's not Toad. The second attack on Vikavolt is super, super, super strong. And also, if you're playing against Vikavolt, you have to figure out how to play around that. Because a lot of people are like, yeah, you're going to hit me for 50, whatever. And then you knock them out, and they don't have a response for that. So I think it's super good.
Cool. Do you think it'll be popular? Like, more than 5% of the meta?
More than 5? Yeah.
Yeah. More than 5. And how about success? Do you think it'll have an okay success rate, relatively speaking? Like, not garbage?
Whoever figures the deck out will see success with it. The problem is lists are all over the place, and I think all of them, including the one I'm using, is trash.
Yeah, lists are kind of hard to refine for it. I'm going to go to Mike. Mike, how do you feel about Decidueye, any of its variants, for POG format?
All I can tell you is that I like Decidueye a lot. So the only thing about it is that everybody's ready for it now, apparently. So everybody's got their techs. ADPZ plays this Drudalon
Duraludon?
thing.
Oh, I don't think you should play Duraludon ADPZ. I personally don't. Meta manipulation, I show up with Decidueye, but I took that out right quick out of my list. But go ahead, Mike.
They play Duraludon. Cinescorch plays Volcanion, which is fine. Obviously, Rogue decks play their own one prizers that slap you around. And Pico will probably end up playing like Electros or Zapdos or maybe something of the sort. But it's okay. I've got something for them. So, I can't leave.
Do you think enough people actually will play these Decidueye techs? Anybody can answer that? I don't think enough people will play it that Decidueye should care. Does anyone agree or disagree? Like, I don't think enough people will play counters to Decidueye that the 30 people playing Decidueye should worry about the counters.
I mean probably not. Yeah. Probably most people won't even think about it. I mean, probably like 15% of the players have even looked at this Decidueye. So, I mean, you're probably in good company if you decide to play it. But, I mean, you still have to figure out the deck, and it's a stage 2 deck, so it comes with its own inconsistencies, and at the end of the day, the only thing keeping you alive or keeping you in the game is the ability on the Decidueye. So,
yeah. Any other thoughts on Decidueye, Kevin or Danny?
Personally, I think that the biggest issue with Decidueye is that you're playing Decidueye, and I think that it's very, very hard. So I've tried a list with Groviles as the main setup engine and multiple, what's a guy called, the emo one, Dartrix, to get around the item lock that Vikavolt offers. I feel like Vikavolt's an auto loss otherwise because you just cannot set up. They'll just keep bossing you around. And then Tapu Koko can take out a Decidueye. I think people will be playing techs, especially in day one, where they're more comfortable, putting that space in. And I think towards day 2, the deck just gets inherently worse because people in day 2 like to play random decks because there's nothing to lose at that point. You've made it to day 2, you need to go for it. So I think maybe control archetypes, things like that, might pop around. The random Guru in a hammer deck that isn't control or something like that can completely, just crush the deck. And then obviously, like I said, Vikavolt. So the Grovile thing wasn't working out very well. The deck seems to be an inconsistent mess, and the biggest issue is when they do take a KO and they target your energy down with that KO, that it's really hard to get an attack going. So you just have no immediate pressure, and then decks like Centiskorch that have the inherent for Volcanion are just already poised to just slap you around a bit. So the deck is not only an inconsistent pile right now, and if someone could find the right list, it might be pretty good, but you have to find the right list, and on top of that you have to hope that they're not attacking for you, and then hit the right matchups and so on and so forth. So so Azul said this perfectly on a stream. If you're debating playing Decidueye and you think it's worth it, play the darn deck. But
Mhm.
if you if you think that it might get countered or whatever, or you're not too comfortable with it, then just play something safer, because Decidueye is the kind of deck where if it's not being respected, it can do well, and very few people, I think, would want to play it right now, because it's not being respected as much, but some people are respecting it, and on top of that, the inherently bad matchups are very, very large obstacles for the deck, and something unprecedented in my opinion for Obstagoon, and then for the attacking Hoopa of the past, where there's just multiple bad matchups instead of just one or two lying around. So
Cool. Kevin, is Luca Metal Zacian being under-respected right now?
So that's a really hard one to actually say, because anyone who comes to my chat is usually going to ask me about Luke Metal.
Yeah.
So a bunch of people that I know are really hyping the deck up. I don't know what the rest of the PTCG world thinks, but I'm going to say yes. It is being under-respected because it is a very strong deck.
I have it. Oh, go ahead. No, continue.
I was going to say the Galarian Stunfisk edition is actually kind of really good. And that and Birdkeeper kind of give the deck extra consistency and extra tools that it lacked before. And so I think it's stronger than it used to be, for sure.
I have it sitting upper tier 2, I think. And I've been a huge fan of the deck. It was my favorite deck of the Sword and Shield meta. It did top 16 in the PJNO. And I think, like, a lot of people just overlook that, and they say, well, yeah, but Vika got first and second. But yeah, Luke Metal has a favorable matchup in Vika. It has a favorable matchup in Draga, if that's still played. It is generally, like, slightly favored versus ADPZ, I think, if things, like, go as they usually do. But I'm sure someone could argue me on that. Even if you play Oranguru for Intrepid Sword, you have, like, an out to being, like, chip locked in control situations. So I think it's a solid deck. It still has scary things, like it has Blacephalon, it has Picoram that gained Bolt Tund and made that matchup much more intricate than it used to be. But yeah, I think it's a really solid deck, and I think if you're somebody like Kevin who has had a lot of fun and really kind of championed the deck in the past, then maybe you stick with it. Like, I don't think it's a deck to get scared off of by any means, because I think it's still solid. Does anybody else have thoughts on Luke Metal? Because myself and Kevin, like, would marry the deck, so maybe some unbiased opinions.
Luke Metal. I mean, I don't really like Luke Metal because I'm a Draga player, so getting full metal walled is kind of like death. So I don't have any cool words to say about Luke Metal. Just a little bit of salt.
Danny, do you think there's a reason to ever play Luke Metal over ADPZ? Do you think they're completely different decks? Do you think one's just better than the other?
I think the deck has been definitely what's the word I'm looking for? It's definitely an underrated deck in the last format. People were scared off by Baby Blounds, but the issue with that was that Baby Blounds was being played so heavily, very highly represented last format, because it was just kind of hit the stones, you beat everything kind of deck. So people were, more into it. Now that Baby Blounds has an extremely bad matchup in Vikavolt, I think that it will definitely be a bit less represented, like I was saying earlier. So now, if any, is Luke Metal's time to shine. Post-rotation, Luke Metal is still around, and I think post-rotation is going to be insane for Luke Metal, so look out for that. But for right now, the deck's really good. Toughness Cape and taking 30 less damage, maybe a Pan here and there, Plant Stamp if you want to go for that. I think all of those are great options in this format right now, along with the energy removal and the inherent ability to set up multiple Zamazenta that just cannot get touched by anything, and then people's unwillingness to tech for Zamazenta right now, or in Eternatus's case, inability to, because there are so few strong techs against that. I think the deck can really shine now. the decks that it does have issues with, like for example, now that there's Scorch, it really does have issues with those decks. But you can honestly still get around that. If you have a Pan on a Zamazenta, you're one shot in those Volks. They're not doing very much to you. You can get around that, and if that plant stamp sticks for for the right amount of time, you're winning that game. So by all means, I would say that the deck should not be disrespected. I think if people do have a stronger Zamazenta counter, they should easily put it into their decks for this event. And that the deck, the only thing that could possibly hurt the deck now is people respecting it, which they haven't done in the past. So if you're basing it off of precedence, the deck is easily one of the top decks going into the POG championship.
Awesome. Mike, do you think there is a difference when talking about day 1 choices and day 2 choices? And if so, could you talk about it briefly?
So in the POG championship, can you switch your deck between day 1 and 2?
Yes.
Oh,
it's just like Worlds, because there are people who got instant day 2 invites. So the top 16 or whatever from each rating zone have day 2 invites, just like you would at Worlds. So yes, you can change for day 2, and day 2 is best 2 out of 3, which generally speaking means that mill control decks with a longer game plan would maybe pop up in day 2, but not in day 1.
I mean, most people, matter of fact, don't overthink it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. So if you made day 1 with it, then you finished out and you made it to day 2, it's probably the better deck for you to play, unless you've been playing 2 decks and you feel comfortable with the other one going into day 2. Outside of mill, I do believe that mill will come into play. And if that's your thing and you don't play mill on day 1, then you should play mill on day 2. That's for sure.
Danny, any brief thoughts on that? Because I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but any helpful thoughts on that?
On mill?
On the difference between day 1 and day 2, and then anything about control or mill.
Well, day 1, obviously, in my opinion, the most represented deck is going to be ADPZ. That's because a lot of people in day 1, since it's so much more wide open, probably going to be people who are not as committed to putting in the money for codes right now to get the newer cards. So we'll see some ADPZ and Picoram way more than day 2. And like I said, for day 2, since it's kind of like a League Cup where you just slap a deck together, hit the right matchups, and you're going to hit the home run. I think people are going to be a bit more creative with their deck options, with their tech ideas, and people might be a little more focused on trying to beat specific things because of the smaller player pool, even though it's not going to be very small. Period. It is smaller. So I think that it'll be a little bit different, but nothing nothing too crazy. And ADPZ is going to be the biggest deck day 1, so make sure your deck beats that or at least contends against it. And day 2, anything could happen. So
cool.
And then,
are there any major decks I am missing that anybody wants to touch on before we kind of go through just a lightning round of rating decks on or off, like if they're good or not? Anything that anybody wanted to touch on?
I want to touch on Combo Z real quick.
Oh, perfect. So, I completely passed right by it on my list, so thank you.
The addition of Turbo Patch is actually really nice, because one of the problems with the deck before is you get those Zacian hands where you're like, well, I either Intrepid Sword and probably lose because I lost all of my tempo, or I get rid of 3 Metal Saucers. And so adding the Turbo Patch gives you that extra little option, maybe not as a 4 of. I've squeezed it into a 4 of list and the whole thing gets a little less consistent, but having extra energy acceleration is really nice. And then you just have that ability to be like, oh, that's a nice Crobat you got there, 3 prizes. And so I like Combo Z. I don't know if I love it, but it's worth checking out.
That's fair.
So, I wanted to go through some lists I have in the tier 1, tier 2, or decks, I'm sorry, in the tier 1, tier 2, and then a little bit of the top of tier 3. I'm just going to ask each of you a deck, and I'll go in a cycle. Just tell me if you think the deck should be successful, has potential, or probably no potential. So, successful, potential, or no potential. Those are the 3 choices. We'll start with Kevin. Scorch.
Successful.
Danny, Picoram.
I'm a little back and forth with it.
So maybe between potential, popular, and maybe potential.
Popular, maybe potential.
Mike, Dragapol.
Unpopular, has potential.
Combo Z, Kevin.
Definitely not popular, but potential.
Okay. Danny, Luke Metal, Zacian.
Maybe like kind of middle ground popular with potential for sure.
Okay. Mike. This is for day 1, by the way.
Day 1 is best of 1.
Best of 1, 25 minutes, I believe.
You'd have to be a bold guy. You'd probably be successful. It'd be unpopular, but it'll be successful if they do it.
Kevin, Eternatus variants with the Weavile GX Darkrai Prism package.
I'm gonna say not popular, but I haven't touched that thing at all, so I can't say whether or not successful.
Okay. Danny, Spirit Tomb variants, either old or new.
Unpopular, unsuccessful.
Mike, Welder boxes of any sorts. Heatran, Reshizard, Ninetales, no Ninetales, Welder, deck.
Unpopular, successful though.
Successful?
Yeah.
Okay. Obstagoon variants, with Sableye, without Sableye, whatever it is. Kevin.
Unpopular with Decidueye potential.
Any Mewtwo variant at all, Danny, and you can specify if you want.
Mewtwo Welder, unpopular, unsuccessful. Mewtwo Malamar, unpopular, unsuccessful. Yeah.
Okay. And last, I think we'll do Mad Party, Mike.
I think Danny's a capper, and this deck is not good.
Will it be popular?
No.
Okay. Cool. So we'll do shout outs real quick and any final thoughts that popped into your head that we didn't get to do in the beginning. We'll go Mike, Danny, then Kevin. Mike, go ahead, shout out any thoughts, and maybe if you want to throw a couple things that you would play. No leaks, of course.
Bro, I just actually leaked a play to your phone, like to your DM.
Oh my god.
Right? It's a crazy, wacky play. You have to check the chat.
Okay.
It might be fire, but it might be trash.
Alright. So yeah, shout outs and wrap us up.
Shout out to you, Celio's Network. You're the guy. Thanks for having me on. Shout out to Cutter Tap, the guys. We'll have cool announcements soon. Shout out to everybody else, my co-casters, because you guys rock. I watch your stream when I'm on stream or on Twitch. And Danny's the homie from way back, so you know what it is. Do I shamelessly plug stuff here, or what?
Yeah, drop your SoundCloud, bro. Like
I will never do that, but I will show you these cool stickers.
Awesome. Big things for Mike Morton coming up.
The album drops in like 2 months.
And couple top picks.
Top picks for the POG?
Yeah, for POG Day 1. Doesn't have to be a leak or anything.
So if the spicy deck could work, if the spicy deck works after testing, then the spicy deck is definitely really cool, especially for Day 1. I like Pika. Pika is safe. And I'm gonna actually go with the popular deck, Eternatus. I think it'll figure out a way to beat ADP.
Yeah, I think Eternatus will be popular. I think it'll see success. You know, I think enough people will play it that it'll make its way in. Danny, shout outs and wrap us up with some picks.
Alrighty, first off, I want to shout all three of you guys out. I think your analysis has been incredible on this, and I personally have also learned a lot just from being here. I think anyone who watches this will probably feel way more confident after hearing some of the insight from you guys. So kudos to you guys on that expert analysis there. Thanks to you for having me on this, Luke. I definitely appreciate it. And shout out to the what is it now, 5? Shout out to the 5 people who have subbed to my Patreon. I seriously appreciate it. If you are interested in subbing to my Patreon, that's patreon.com/DaxPTCG, DAXPTCG, where I post all my deck lists as I build them. I update them every single day, so I never leave anyone hanging. And every month, I'm going to have a sub tournament and give away some packs. So check it out, gain some insight, and yeah, sub to my Patreon. With that being said, thanks for having me, everyone. I hope everyone enjoyed this, and it's been fun, guys.
any top picks for the tournament?
Oh yeah, the top picks. First off, Blacephalon Naganadel. I'm super obsessed with that deck. I really hope it works out. I've given it a little bit of a run, and it's pretty good so far. But obviously, finding a good 60 for a deck that hasn't been tested in probably a year or so is going to be a little hard. But I think people should give that deck a sample size. Try and find a list that works for you. It has incredible matchups, especially just to bully these Lucario Melmetal guys. Let's bully these guys, all right? And then the other deck I think that is going to be a top pick. I really wish I could say Mad Party is going to be Vikavolt. I think Vikavolt, out of all the new decks, has the most potential. And since there are so many ways to play it and they're all good, that tells me that the most impressive part of the deck is the item lock factor. And I think that the deck, if it remains unchecked, will be like Toad, where it's super broken. So you have Blacephalon, Naganadel, and you have Vikavolt, and those are my top picks.
And Kevin, same thing. Shout outs, wrap us up, and we'll go on home.
Yeah. So shout outs. Shout out to Tabletop Village, who's my sponsor, run by a friend. Check them out. Shout out to you for getting me on here. It's my first time doing a meta discussion, so I appreciate that. And then shout out my own Twitch channel, of course, twitch.tv/mellow_Magikarp. I'll be testing for POG all week. I'm full leaks because I'm not actually good enough to, come up with anything super broken. And then shout out to my team for POG, Carpe D's Rats. One of us is going to win the whole thing.
That's awesome. And a couple picks. Luke Metal can be one of them.
So full on, if the tournament were tomorrow, I'd be playing Vikavolt, but Luke Metal's going to get a lot of attention from me and potentially Decidueye because it's an open decklist tournament. Like, I'm a safe person. I will play the safe pick all the time, but to anyone watching, remember it is a fun tournament. Like, yeah, there's money at the end, but if you want to go big and spicy, there's no reason not to. Like, 0-3 drop, day 2, it's whatever. But yeah, I'm going safe.
Okay, cool. So a reminder to have fun from Kevin. And thank you all for watching. If you're not subbed to the channel already, please consider it if you enjoyed the content. Shout out to my sponsor, PotownStore.com. If you need PTCGO codes of any sort, they probably have them in stock. And enjoy the POG tournament. And there's also other meta discussions. I know Gyro Sean has some content. The Atlas POG Twitch channel did a meta discussion, and you can find still on their Twitch. And if you have any questions, of course, leave it in the comments. I'll grab you a link if you need a resource. So have a good day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.